All right. I want to talk a little bit about Katie Britt again. This poor, miserable, kitchen-dwelling woman who gave the response to Biden's State of the Union address. Oh, and wasn't it a response? Oh, my God, this woman. She said this is part of what she said. I have a break coming here pretty quickly, so this is going to carry over. But if you were watching her speech Thursday night, you might have thought she was talking about a recent victim of a sex trafficking horror who was abused in the U.S. and suffered because of Biden's policies. This is what she said, quote, "We know that President Biden didn't just create the border crisis. He invited it. He invited it with 94 executive actions in his first 100 days. When I took office, I took a different approach. I traveled to the Del Rio sector of Texas. That's where I spoke to a woman who shared her story with me. She had been sex trafficked by the cartel starting at the age of 12. She told me not just that she was raped every day, but how many times a day she was raped. The cartels put her on a mattress in a shoebox of a room, and they sent men through that door over and over again for hours and hours on end. We wouldn't be okay with this happening in a third world country. This is the United States of America, and it is past time, in my opinion, that we start acting like it. President Biden's border policies are a disgrace." Okay, that's the quote. Thanks to the Washington Post for that. That is the quote. And I watched as much of this silly woman's response to the State of the Union as much as I could. And when I got to this part, the part I just quoted for you, I sat there thinking, what the fuck is she talking about? Well, if you thought she was talking about the Biden administration, if you thought she was talking about a rape in the United States, you got both of them wrong. Sean Ross, who is Miss Britt's communications director, confirmed that she was talking about a woman named Carla Jacinto Romero, who has testified before Congress about being forced to work in Mexican brothels from 2004 to 2008. The key word there being, of course, Mexican. In a phone conversation and a statement with the Washington Post, Miss Ross disputed that Britt's language was misleading. Well, the Washington Post begs to differ. And when we come back after the break, we're going to take a look at the facts. Remember, the Post has this delicious habit of keeping track of the lies of Donald Trump. They logged in over 30,000 lies. They call them misstatements. 30,000 lies over the course of his presidency. But this is what happens even if you're a sweet little Alabama girl named Katie Boyd Britt. When you hang out with Donald Trump, it's just what your grandma told you, Katie. You lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas or rabies. One of the two. Yeah. Well, everybody who gets close to Donald Trump eventually winds up completely corrupted, polluted, and in so many instances, eventually on their way to jail. Katie Britt's false linkage, her bullshit of a sex trafficking case, linking it to Joe Biden. But like I mentioned right before the break, this is what happens to you. This is what, first of all Christian fascists are, at the very bottom, liars. And they don't give a shit to whom they lie. How do they make their prayers at night? You know, when I was younger, I used to say my nighttime prayers, thanks to my grandma insisting that I do it. And I can remember, honest to God, I can remember as a kid thinking when I said my prayers at night, I had to be completely honest because of the Ten Commandments. I figured if I wasn't honest, I would be guilty of lying and a couple of other commandments I would have been breaking if I didn't do it the way my grandmother taught me. So I wonder how Katie Boyd Britt this lovely young senator from Alabama, how does she go in front of the camera and just spew out this bullshit? And the only answer I can come up with is what I've said many times. You get into Donald Trump's orbit, he sucks out your ability to think rationally. He's like a fucking psychic vampire. He just sucks out your whatever credibility you have. He sucks out whatever honor you might have been working to develop. He sucks out your truthfulness. And he takes your Christian religion and turns it into something that only a demented, crazy bastard could come up with. Well, it happened to Katie Boyd Britt. Anyway, the Washington Post, I shared with you right before the break, they published what she said about the rape that occurred at the border, which it didn't. But the Post goes on, and they, since they have a truth squad at the Post, they have fact checkers. They're the ones who discovered over 30,000 lies by the orange bastard when he was in the White House the last time. So here we go. This is from the Post. They write, Britt's account of Ms. Romero's experience was a centerpiece of her rebuttal to Biden's address. And the way Britt set up the story, there's no indication she's talking about a woman who was working in brothels in Mexico during the George W. Bush administration. And first, the way her story unfolded, first she blames Biden for the surge of migrants at the border. Only somebody who'd had their brains sucked out by these Christian fascists could believe that. I've said it before, and I know you know this. What causes the border crisis is the policies developed by the United States over 125 years against the people of Latin America. Policies that fostered dictatorial governments, policies that destroyed human rights, policies that destroyed the environment. So now that it's reached a point where it's intolerable for the people to live there, for a number of reasons, they start heading north. And we treat them like shit. We treat them like dirt. What am I advocating? Am I advocating open borders? Well, if you're a regular listener, you know my feeling about borders. I think national borders are horseshit. I mean, really, who in the hell decided, well, we're going to put a line here, and the people live on this side of the line, we'll call them X, the people live on this side of the line, we'll call them Y. That's a different topic. Anyway, she blames Biden for the surge of migrants at the border. Then she says she visited the border shortly after she took office. That would be in 2023 when she was elected senator from Alabama. And then at length she details the story of an unnamed victim that she says she met on her trip. The implication is that the woman recently crossed the border because of, quote, sex trafficking by the cartels, end quote. And then Miss Katie Boyd Britt strongly suggests that this woman's abuse took place in the U.S. Katie Boyd said this, quote, "We wouldn't be okay with this happening in a third world country. This is the United States of America, and it's past time, in my opinion, that we start acting like it," end quote. That's part of what Katie Boyd Britt said. And she ends her little tirade by reinforcing that such alleged trafficking is Biden's fault when she says, quote, "President Biden's border policies are a disgrace," end quote. The linkage there is unmistakable. She lays out this lurid story of something that happened 30 years ago and then immediately links it to Joe Biden as if Biden sets border policies. He doesn't. The Congress of the United States. The president proposes, Congress disposes. We all learned that in 9th grade, didn't we? But to the Christian fascists, no, that's not how it works. Your Lord and Master makes these decisions, just like our beautiful, lovely Antichrist is going to do when he is president again. Oh, come on, please hurry. Biden had nothing to do with Miss Romero's story. The woman that Katie Britt is referring to testified 9 years ago. And in that testimony, she said her mother threw her out of the house at age 12, and she, quote, fell prey to a professional pimp, end quote. Ms. Romero then says she spent the next 4 years in brothels before a regular client helped her escape when she was 16. There's no indication in her story that drug cartels were involved. Though Ms. Katie Britt said that in the State of the Union response and has made similar claims on at least one other occasion. Ms. Romero was never trafficked to the United States. Instead, she says many men who paid to have sex with her were, quote, foreigners visiting my city looking to have sexual interactions with minors like me, end quote. And you gotta wonder, or I gotta wonder, how many of those sexual encounters with this 13, 14, 15-year-old girl were conducted by, religious people. People go to church every Sunday. Anyway, back to what the Post reports. In a YouTube video, Katie Britt features images of her hugging Miss Romero during her trip to the border in 2023. In the video, Katie Britt says, quote, if we as leaders of the greatest nation in the world are not fighting to protect the most vulnerable, we are not doing our job, end quote. The implication again is that this is happening on Biden's watch. When Trump was president, he regularly said human trafficking, he went after human trafficking that he claimed was happening at the border, including, Trump said, quote, thousands of young girls and women were being smuggled across the border for prostitution, end quote. Well, in 2019, the Washington Post investigated that claim and found no evidence to support it. Most human trafficking prosecutions generally involve legal border crossings, visa fraud, and travel to the U.S. on airplanes. Victim organizations say there are relatively few cases that involve forced kidnappings across the border. And that might be one reason that little old Senator Britt regularly cites a case that happened long ago and did not even involve crossing the border. This woman, Miss Romero, was repeatedly forced into sexual situations in Mexico. Now back to Miss Britt's spokesperson, Sean Ross. Ross said that Romero's study was indicative of trafficking that is now happening at the border, and that should be clear from the way Miss Britt framed the story in her speech. Ross said, referencing the reference to a third world country that Britt used, was generic and was not intended to refer to Mexico, which he said is not a third world country. Third world is a dated Cold War era term previously used to refer to poor or developing countries. Now, there is a organization called Global South. And Global South, indicating low income and high poverty, is a more common expression today. Global South is the expression, come on, Mike, not third world country. Global South is the new economic, sociological way of putting it, I guess. And Mexico is considered part of the Global South, though it is also a member of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. In a written statement, Sean Ross, Senator Britt's mouthpiece, said this, quote, the story Senator Britt told was 100% correct, and there are more innocent victims of that kind of disgusting, brutal trafficking by the cartels than ever before right now. The Biden administration's policies, the policies in this country that the president falsely claims are humane, The Biden administration's policies have empowered the cartels and acted as a magnet to an historic level of migrants making the dangerous journey to our border. Along that journey, children, women, and men are being subjected to gut-wrenching, heartbreaking horrors in our own backyard. And here at home, the Biden administration's policies are leading to more and more suffering, including Americans being poisoned by fentanyl and being murdered. These human costs are real, and it's past time for some on the left to stop pretending otherwise. End quote. Well, Sean, I mean, you're full of shit as a Christmas goose. I mean, some of your stories here are just, how many times these people have to be told that, yes, there are drug cartels that are shipping fentanyl into the United States, but where's the fentanyl manufactured? It's manufactured in China, for fuck's sake. Why don't you address that, Senator? So anyway, then the Washington Post, after close examination, put Katie Britt's tale of woe to what they call the Pinocchio test. You know, Pinocchio, whose nose got longer every time he lied, right? This is what the Post says. In a high-profile speech like this, a politician should not mislead voters with emotionally charged language. Ms. Romero's story is tragic and may be evocative of other Mexican girls trapped in the sex trade in that country. But she was not trafficked across the border, and her story has nothing to do with Biden. Britt's failure to make that clear earns her 4 Pinocchios. And I think 4 Pinocchios is about the highest that the Washington Post goes in identifying somebody as a goddamn liar. Just a complete fraud liar. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.